The air inside the restaurant seemed unusually frigid. The thermostat read the customary 75 degrees, however. Vesper felt the coldness creep along the dark skin of her arms. It was a chilling premonition entirely unrelated to the room's temperature. Seated across the solid mahogany table, her husband Cassius gazed more at his phone's screen than his plate of braised short ribs, a dish he normally adored. That subtle smile dancing on the edge of his lips was decidedly not meant for Vesper. His smile was aimed at a different world concealed behind the glowing glass in his hands. Vesper placed her spoon down gently, careful not to make a sound that could disturb her husband's private pleasure. This exact scene had defined her existence for the past 6 months. Cassius would come home, set down his briefcase, shower, and then clutch his phone as if it was his only lifeline. Their talks had grown short and purely transactional. They were confined to simple questions about his dinner, or if he had any appointments scheduled for the next day. "Darling, how did your meeting go this afternoon?" Vesper inquired. Her voice was slightly more fragile than she had intended. She desperately wanted to dismantle the unseen barrier growing between them. Cassius raised his head and his gaze took a moment to find her like a traveler returning from a faraway journey. "The meeting, oh, it was fine. As usual," he answered curtly. Just before his thumb could resume its nimble dance across the screen, Vesper inhaled deeply. She was a woman who had forged her own success from nothing. Her fashion empire, Vesper 5 Mode, now boasted 3 major stores in downtown Chicago, and her personal investment portfolio, which she managed herself, had expanded to become a fortune that vastly overshadowed Cassius's administrative income. She was accustomed to dissecting problems, discovering solutions, and taking decisive action. Yet in her own marriage she felt helpless. She sensed something was amiss, but she held on to the hope it was a fleeting stage, a momentary lull that would soon pass. On that particular night, her hope was demolished. Following their quiet meal, Cassius did not retreat to his home office as he normally did. Instead, he followed Vesper to the living room, sat on the sofa across from her, and set his phone face down upon the coffee table. This simple gesture was so deliberate, so weighty, that Vesper's stomach twisted. "Vesper, there is something I must say," Cassius started. His voice was completely flat, empty of all emotion, like a physician about to give a terrible diagnosis. Vesper just nodded, her heart starting to hammer in her chest. She entwined her fingers, which felt suddenly icy and damp, against her dark skin. "I believe our marriage has come to an end," Cassius went on. His gaze was locked on the wall behind Vesper. As he avoided her eyes, "I've considered this long and carefully. We should get a divorce." That single word, divorce, remained suspended in the air, sharp and deadly. It felt as if Vesper's entire world had frozen. The grandfather clock's ticking, which was normally a comforting sound, now echoed like the pounding of a judge's gavel. Vesper parted her lips to respond, but no words emerged. Her throat felt constricted. Cassius interpreted his wife's silence as a form of acceptance. He carried on with his explanation in that same detached voice. "This isn't your fault, Vesper. You have been a wonderful wife, but I can no longer lie to myself. I'm still in love with Cleo." The name Cleo, the name of Cassius's ex-girlfriend, the one he had left 8 years prior, long before he and Vesper had ever met. The name he'd occasionally bring up in nostalgic tales, the name that always made Vesper feel she was a secondary character in the story of her own husband's life. "I've been speaking with her again for a few months," Cassius admitted without a hint of shame, "and we have realized we should have never broken up. I want a fresh start." Vesper finally found her voice, though it was barely a raw whisper. "A fresh start." "Exactly," Cassius agreed, nodding as if it were the most logical thing. "For that, we must settle our affairs as quickly and fairly as possible. Let's just split all our assets down the middle. That would be the most efficient way. This house, our savings, the investments. It is fair. No." That question felt like a second blow. hurting more than the divorce request. Fair. This entire house was paid for exclusively, with the yearly bonuses from Vesper's company. Most of the savings and virtually all investments came from the profits of her boutiques and her acumen in the stock market. Cassius's income just about covered daily costs and his car loan, and that was all. But in Cassius's mind, all of it was our fortune. It was the result of the combined effort from which he was now poised to take half to fund a new life with another woman. Vesper gave no reply. She just stared at her husband, the man who had shared her bed for 7 years, the very man whose career she had championed, the man she had loved with all her heart. That man now appeared like a stranger, negotiating a hostile business acquisition, not ending a marriage. That night, sleep eluded Vesper. At 2 in the morning, she rose from the bed. A thirst had taken hold. She moved quietly toward the kitchen for a glass of water. As she neared Cassius's office, its door slightly ajar, she caught her husband's voice. It was no longer flat or detached. It was alive with warmth and laughter. "Just be patient a bit longer, babe. This will all be over soon," Cassius said to the person on the other end of the call. "The entire process will be fast. I've already informed her." A brief pause followed. Vesper held her breath, pressing her ear closer to the crack of the door. Her reaction? She was stunned of. Course, but she is weak. She has always been that way. His laugh echoed again, light and unconcerned. "She will not complicate this. Vesper is utterly devoted to me. She will sign whatever document I place before her. Do not worry, my love. All of her our assets will fund our new palace. You can stop working and we can travel the world just as we always planned. Our assets, our new palace." Those two phrases struck Vesper like a bolt of lightning. The burning anguish in her chest transformed into an icy resolve. The tears that were about to fall seemed to evaporate in a moment. She slowly retreated from the doorway. Her fists were clenched so hard her knuckles turned white against her dark skin. She returned to their bedroom, but not to lie down. She positioned herself before the large, full-length mirror in the corner. She examined her reflection. A woman with a weary face and swollen eyes. A woman he had called weak. A woman he deemed a fool. But what she saw in her eyes was no longer vulnerability. What she saw was the flicker of a fire just beginning to ignite a cold, sharp, and deadly flame. Her pain had transformed into something new, something more powerful resolve. Cassius was gravely mistaken. This war would be over swiftly, just not as he had foreseen. Vesper would avoid court because soon there would be nothing left for him to take, for him to contend with. She would reclaim each dollar, each share, and every single brick she had laid with her own sweat and tears. Amid the stillness of the night, Vesper made a solemn vow. Cassius could steal her past, but she would seize her own entire future. The following morning, the sun ascended predictably over Chicago's skyline, yet for Vesper, everything had been irrevocably altered. Descending for breakfast, she found Cassius already at the table sipping his coffee while browsing news on his tablet. He glanced up as she entered. Upon seeing her, a hint of astonishment flickered across his features. Vesper showed no signs of a woman whose life had just shattered. She was freshly showered. She wore a flawless navy blouse, her hair gathered in a polished, sophisticated chignon that accentuated her delicate features. Not a single tear marked her face, just an eerie composure. "Good morning," Vesper stated, her voice even and low. She took a piece of toast, applying jam with methodical precision. Her actions were measured and unhurried. "Good morning," Cassius answered, feeling slightly uneasy. He observed her attempting to decipher her expression. "Are you all right?" "I will be," Vesper responded, meeting Cassius's gaze directly, without flinching. "I've considered what transpired last night, and you are correct. It's pointless to cling to something that is beyond repair. Let us conclude this peacefully." Cassius seemed relieved. A slight smile graced his lips, just as he hoped Vesper was compliant and wouldn't cause a scene. I'm so glad you're being mature, Vesper. You have lifted a great weight from me. I require some time to myself today, Vesper went on, to clear my head and get organized. I will be in the study. You needn't concern yourself with me. Of course, naturally. Take as much time as you require. Cassius stated magnanimously, feeling like the most clever man alive. He drained his coffee, took his briefcase and departed with a spring in his step, certain the largest hurdle had been effortlessly overcome. Then, the moment Cassius's car engine faded into the distance, her placid facade instantly crumbled. She shed no tears, but her jaw clenched and an icy resolve filled her gaze. Rather than retreat to her bedroom to mourn, she strode purposefully to her study. That room served as her command post where her empire was conceived and built. On this day, that same room would become the war room for the single most critical mission of her life. She bolted the door, an act she seldom performed. Next, she accessed the safe concealed by a landscape painting. Within lay not just jewels, but a dense sheaf of official documents. She arranged them across the expansive desk: the property deed, the certificates for the apartment she inherited from her parents, titles for the commercial properties she leased, her stock portfolio statements, and the incorporation papers for her business, Vesper Mode, and financial statements from the past 5 years. She then powered on her laptop, launching a new spreadsheet. Methodically, she started to inventory every asset they owned. She partitioned it into 3 distinct columns. The first column, solely mine. This section detailed the assets she held prior to the marriage, like her downtown Chicago apartment and the gold bullion she inherited from her grandmother. These assets were undisputedly hers, but she knew Cassius's slick lawyer would surely try to challenge them. The next column, fruit of my labor. This was the most substantial list, including the house they lived in, whose mortgage was paid off using annual bonuses from the company, the Lake Geneva villa purchased solely in Vesper's name, the 3 boutique branches, and all of their inventory. Inside the portfolio of stocks and funds currently valued at hundreds of thousands of dollars, all of it built with the profits of her own business. The third column, joint property. Vesper almost let a scornful laugh escape at seeing this column. Its contents listed a single item, a joint bank account that fluctuated with household expenses, and 2 cars. Her vehicle paid for in cash, and Cassius's, which he was still paying for, in installments. Looking at this breakdown, on the screen, her fury solidified. Cassius's demand to split everything 50-50 felt like nothing short of daylight robbery. Vesper's hand reached for her phone. For a moment, her fingers hovered over the contact details for her company's regular attorney. No, she couldn't use him. Cassius knew him as well. She needed somebody new, somebody unpredictable, someone with a truly fearsome reputation. She recalled a name a business associate had once mentioned in passing, an attorney nicknamed a wolf in sheep's clothing for his deadly tactics despite his unassuming appearance. She looked up the name online: Thaddeus King and Associates. Without a moment's hesitation, she dialed the number on her screen. Good morning, Thaddeus King and Associates. A woman's voice answered on the other end of the line. Good morning. I must speak with attorney Thaddeus King. The matter is urgent. Vesper stated, her tone unyielding. After a short pause, a deep, steady voice came on the line. This is Thaddeus King. Hello, Attorney King. My name is Vesper Vance. A colleague of mine provided me with your contact. I need a private consultation immediately. The matter is regarding a divorce and the protection of assets. Has the petition already been filed? Thaddeus got straight to the point. No, Vesper replied instantly. And I want this settled before that ever happens. I have no desire to fight this in court. I want this war to be won before the enemy even knows the battle has started. There was a momentary silence from the other end of the line, as if Thaddeus was assessing his potential new client. I like your style, Miss Vance. Are you able to meet me at my office today during lunch? No, Vesper interrupted. I cannot be seen entering a law firm. We should meet somewhere else. Somewhere discreet. Silence fell again. Then Thaddeus's voice returned, this time tinged with a note of impressed tone. Very well. There's a small soul food restaurant named the Velvet Lounge on the south side. It's quiet. During the day. I will meet you there at lunch. After hanging up the phone, Vesper immediately called the second person on her team, her financial advisor and stockbroker, Odora. Odora was a very practical middle-aged woman who had handled a portion of Vesper's portfolio with immense loyalty for years. Odora, I need help, Vesper began without any preamble. I'm divorcing Cassius. A brief silence hung in the air. I'm so sorry to hear that, Vesper. How can I help? Odora replied, her tone a mix of professional and empathetic. I need to liquidate several positions immediately, but incrementally, so it won't affect the market or attract any notice. I'll also need to set up a new brokerage and bank account at another bank entirely separate from my current ones. This all needs to be handled with the utmost discretion. Understood, Odora responded. Forward me the list of stocks you're liquidating first. I'll get all the necessary documents for these new accounts. We'll use a fully digital system so no mail will ever arrive at your residence. Thank you, Odora. I'm truly in your debt. Think nothing of it. Just call it a large-scale portfolio restructuring. Odora tried to ease the tension. Ending the call, Vesper felt her resolve strengthen. The wheels were officially in motion. Now, it was time for the first concrete step, the one to initiate the process of taking back her life. She launched the online banking application on her laptop and logged into their joint account. Its balance was around $40,000. The bulk of it had been deposited automatically 3 days earlier, a dividend payment from her investments. Cassius obviously had no idea, or simply didn't care where it came from. He only saw that the money existed. Vesper navigated to the transfer menu and input the account number for her business Vesper 5 mode. In the field for the amount she entered $30,000. In the memo section she typed, "Payment to fabric suppliers, autumn collection." It was an entirely plausible reason that could be substantiated with a pro forma invoice she could produce at a moment's notice. Her finger paused over the confirm button. Her heart was pounding. This was it, the point of no return. It was her first move to actively conceal assets. There was a faint tremor of fear, but a more powerful wave of resolve washed over it. She clicked the button. Transaction complete. She then closed the laptop, returned all the papers to the safe, and locked it securely. Leaving the study, her face regained its familiar composure from that morning. She went into the kitchen, brewed some chamomile tea, and sat by the window to gaze out at the garden. When Cassius came home that evening, he saw Vesper in the living room reading a book. "So have you finally calmed down a little?" he asked. "Yes," Vesper answered quietly as she closed her book. "I'm prepared to begin the process whenever you are ready." A smirk of satisfaction crossed Cassius's face. He had no idea the actual process had kicked off that morning and that he was not invited. Over the next several weeks, Vesper maintained a double life with the exact precision of a skilled, seasoned actress. To the outside world, she was the wounded but stoic wife. She allowed her shoulders to slump slightly. She rarely smiled, and her gaze often appeared lost in sorrow. The performance was exceptionally convincing, especially for Cassius, whose massive ego prevented him from seeing past his own assumptions. "So what documents do we usually need?" Vesper asked one evening, as they ate their meal in a strained silence, prodding at her plate with a fork as if her appetite had vanished. I'm clueless about this whole thing," she added. Cassius, feeling dominant and in charge, explained with a pretense of patience. "The process isn't complicated. My attorney is preparing everything. The essential documents are our IDs, tax forms, and the marriage certificate. Then comes the settlement agreement. You simply need to sign it. The more you cooperate, the sooner this will all be concluded and we can both move on." Start a new life. Vesper echoed softly, a painful whisper meant only for herself. Internally, she sneered. Of course Cassius wanted it over with fast. The the quicker it moved, the less opportunity Vesper had to consult a lawyer or devise a way to foil his scheme. I only wish for this to end peacefully. Vesper added, her eyes welling with calculated tears for Cassius. I have no desire to fight. Of course a fight is the last thing we need. He patted Vesper's hand, a gesture of solace that felt intensely insulting to her. I will ensure it all proceeds smoothly. Yet beneath her submissive facade, Vesper was already acting with speed and silence, with precision. Her meeting with attorney Thaddeus King at the Velvet Lounge became her pivotal moment. Thaddeus was a man, in his 50s, with a fatherly demeanor and slender spectacles, who looked nothing like the legal shark he truly was. He had a soft voice and listened intently, never once cutting into Vesper's tale. Your situation is quite clear, Miss Vance, Thaddeus stated once Vesper concluded. Timing is everything. Before the divorce papers are officially filed with the court, any assets you hold are yours to control by law, which includes their sale or transfer. We would not be engaging in anything unlawful. We're merely reorganizing the ownership of your private holdings. His strategy was simple, yet brilliant. They would first target the assets most easily converted to cash with the weakest links to Cassius's name, the investments. The very next day, while driving to one of her boutiques, Vesper was already taking action, conversing hands-free with her broker Eudora. Her tone was composed and professional, a stark contrast to her own inner state, the rapid pulse drumming in her chest. Eudora, we'll begin with the technology stocks, she instructed. Liquidate 50% of the Digital Horizon portfolio, Vesper commanded. Understood, I'll process the sale over 3 days to secure the optimal price. The proceeds are to be wired straight to the new brokerage account which has been established, Eudora confirmed. Excellent. And the bond funds? Those are simpler. Settling them will take just 2 or 3 business days. I can initiate the process today if you'd like. Do it, Vesper stated with firm resolve. While paused at a red light, a squad car rolled up beside her vehicle. The officer within cast a glance her way, and Vesper's heart immediately lurched. A beat. A wave of irrational fear washed over her. Being a black woman in America, seeing a police car always triggered a specific kind of tension. Today, however, she felt like an outlaw, despite only safeguarding what was rightfully hers. She took a deep breath, compelling herself to stay composed. The light shifted to green and she drove away deliberately, putting the cruiser behind her. The encounter was a stark reminder of the risks involved and the absolute need for composure. Back in her own home, she needed to remain perpetually on guard. Cassius, who was more and more absorbed by his schemes with Cleo, paid little attention to the minor details, yet some moments still managed to steal Vesper's breath away. One afternoon, Cassius came home unexpectedly and saw a stack of mail on the hall table. He picked it up and began sifting through it. Vesper hasn't your credit card statement shown up yet this month? He queried offhandedly as he tore open the envelope containing his own monthly bill. For a second, Vesper's heart seized in her chest. She had moved all accounts to paperless a month prior. Oh, that's right, I switched all the billing to email. It's far more convenient and it helps save some paper, she said with composure from the kitchen, as she brought him a glass of water. All right, Cassius muttered, his focus having already moved on to his own mail. On another occasion, Cassius would then ask, I notice the joint account balance has dropped significantly. What was the expense? Vesper was perfectly prepared with her answer. I used it for a down payment on the Indian silk fabrics for the upcoming bridal collection. I processed the wire transfer as a business expense so it won't factor into our shared assets. Rest assured. She then presented him with a fabricated order confirmation she had ready on her phone. Her explanation, rooted in logic and business details, sounded entirely convincing. Cassius, completely ignorant of the nuances of Vesper's business, offered a simple, unquestioning nod. and didn't question it further. Each successful lie, every clandestine transaction that went off without a hitch, fueled her confidence. She grew progressively skilled at concealing her movements, employing a VPN whenever she logged into her hidden accounts. Her communications with Thaddeus and Odora were via encrypted messaging applications. She moved like a phantom through her own financial world. Late one evening, Vesper sat in her study after Cassius had gone to sleep. On her laptop screen glowed a spreadsheet titled Project Independence. It meticulously listed all of the assets she had already secured. Odora had just sent confirmation that the full proceeds from selling the tech stocks were now securely in her new hidden bank account. With a sense of cold satisfaction, she navigated the cursor over to the line item labeled Digital Horizon Shares. She typed completed in the status column and stared at the word for a long moment. Each time she entered completed, it signified one more step from a painful history and towards a future she would completely control. After closing the laptop, the mask felt heavy, but the weight lifting from her was much lighter. She would continue her performance as the dutiful wife until the final curtain call. And when that moment came, she would be prepared to take her solo bow, accepting the applause for her masterful performance. Following the securing of liquid assets like stocks and funds, Vesper recognized the next phase would be far more intricate and perilous. The time had come to deal with the tangible assets, enormous blocks of wealth, not transferable with a simple mouse click. Real estate. Her gaze was locked on the primary target within this category, their opulent villa on Lake Geneva, which they frequented on weekends. Purchased 3 years prior, the villa wasn't a personal holding but an official asset of Vesper's company, Vesper V Mode. This single fact was both the greatest risk and the absolute key to her strategy. The scheme to sell the villa demanded the utmost precision. This was not a quiet digital transfer, but a procedure that would require notaries, physical paperwork, and prospective buyers. In this endeavor, Thaddeus's part became absolutely essential. They met this time at a bustling family restaurant at the peak of the lunch hour. Thaddeus detailed the plan in a low voice concealed by the noisy surroundings. "We are going to execute a completely legitimate sale," Thaddeus clarified. "Vesper V Mode will be the seller. The buyer will be our newly created investment firm, Skyline Holdings. This company officially is going to be entirely owned by your mother." Vesper nodded, immediately grasping the scheme. "So the funds simply transfer from my company's account to an entity that my mother controls." Precisely. From a legal standpoint, the money is no longer within Vesper 5 Mode's portfolio, so it cannot be claimed as a corporate asset during property division. Yet for all practical purposes, it stays completely under your command, via your mother. We will list it just under market value, providing a solid rationale for a swift sale. Transaction, Thaddeus disclosed. The plan launched. He swiftly processed the establishment of Skyline Holdings. Vesper, meanwhile, started preparing the sales paperwork from Vesper Mode with her trusted manager, Mr. Abernathy. They needed to act swiftly. The longer the property sale lingered, the greater the odds the news would get to Cassius. The moment Vesper dreaded finally occurred one weekend. Cass came to her with an uncharacteristically bright mood. "Honey, I've got a great idea." He began, using an endearment long absent from his lips. "Let's visit the lake house next week. We can take Cleo, give her a preview. We'll call it a pre-introduction before we make things official." Vesper's stomach churned. The request was both thoughtless and incredibly hazardous to her entire plan. A flat refusal would surely raise suspicion. "Cassius," Vesper said, feigning deep exhaustion, "I just can't bring myself to go there at the moment. It holds too many memories." She paused, then delivered her carefully crafted line. "Besides, the villa is now being listed for a long-term lease. Mr. Abernathy is managing it and says there are a few very interested parties scheduled for viewings this week. We really shouldn't interfere. If we can secure rental income, it would be beneficial for both of us, don't you think? The bait was taken. At the thought of passive income from the villa, Cassius's eyes gleamed. Oh, that's a brilliant idea. You've always had a knack for business. He complimented her, completely oblivious to the irony in his words. All right, let Abernathy handle it. Tell him to ask for the absolute highest rent. Yes, then we split the money. Naturally, darling, Vesper answered with a tight smile, but Cassius was impulsive. A mere 3 days later, he chose to drive to Lake Geneva by himself, not informing Vesper. His excuse was a desire to inspect the villa's condition prior to it being leased. But his real motive was to snap a few pictures to show off to Cleo. As Cassius's car turned into the driveway of the villa, Vesper's heart, though miles away in Chicago, felt like it stopped beating. She had just gotten a brief message from Mr. Abernathy. He has arrived. Stay calm. Everything is under control. At the villa, Mr. Abernathy, a man in middle age, a man whose devotion to Vesper was absolute, was performing his part flawlessly. In fact, he was there with a young couple, his very own niece and nephew, posing as prospective tenants from Europe. Good morning to you, sir. Mr. Abernathy greeted with courtesy as Cassius walked in. He presented himself as a partnered real estate agent, not merely Vesper Mode's manager. This house is mine, Cassius announced with arrogance while surveying the main living area. I'm aware. My wife mentioned she intended to lease it. That is correct, sir. I'm here with a pair of prospective tenants from Germany. Mr. Abernathy stated smoothly, gesturing to his relatives, who offered a polite nod. Cassius seemed pleased, strolled through the villa, picturing himself and Cleo lounging beside the pool. He even spoke for a moment with Mr. Abernathy to issue his own instructions. Ensure the rent is collected in dollars. This is a premium property after all, and then give the financial reports to me. I need to be kept informed. Is that clear? Absolutely, sir. My report will go to Miss Vesper Vance, the director for the company that owns the property, and she will forward it on to you, Mr. Abernathy clarified. He answered with diplomacy, subtly reiterating the asset's legal ownership. Cassius's brow furrowed slightly at the news, but didn't dwell on it. After snapping a few pictures, he departed. The moment Cassius's vehicle vanished from sight, Mr. Abernathy promptly called Vesper. A narrow escape, ma'am, Mr. Abernathy remarked. His respiration held a tone of relief. My gratitude, Mr. Abernathy. Your assistance is invaluable, Vesper responded. Her hand clutching the phone still quivered slightly. This event has become the catalyst to speed everything up. Just 2 days after the sales contract between Vesper Viv Mode and Skyline Holdings was executed before the notary, selected by Thaddeus. That same day, hundreds of thousands of dollars from the villa's sale were fully transferred. The funds were now secure, deposited into a corporate account entirely beyond Cassius's reach. That evening, Vesper gazed absently from her bedroom window. She had managed to defend yet another of her fortresses. Yet the triumph felt hollow. She was forced to take apart her life's structure piece by piece, simply to rescue it from the man who was meant to be her husband. Each forward step in her strategy felt like a retreat from the beautiful past and the memories they had shared. Yet she understood retreat was impossible. She must continue to untangle the web of their assets until not one thread remained caught in Cassius's avarice. Having secured the Villa, Vesper now confronted her greatest challenge yet, safeguarding the crown jewel of her empire, Vesper Viv Mode. The company was more than an asset. It represented the culmination of her hard work, vision, and years of sacrifice. Allowing Cassius to claim half the company was akin to surrendering half of her very self. Selling the firm was not an option. She could not desert the enterprise she had constructed from the ground up. The strategy devised with Thaddeus was far more sophisticated and intricate. They planned to reconfigure the share ownership by leveraging a legally engineered debt. The foundation of this strategy rested upon a plausible truth. 7 years prior, as Vesper launched her boutique, she accepted initial financial backing from her own mother. The sum was not enormous, but it was sufficient to lease her first location and acquire inventory. The funds had been considered a gift. No repayment agreement ever existed. Now that gift was to become a substantial capital loan. Thaddeus meticulously composed a backdated loan agreement. This document specified that Vesper's mother had provided her the capital on the condition that if it were not repaid in cash inside of 7 years, the debt would become 75% of the Vesper Viv Mode shares. The paperwork was crafted to appear completely genuine. This is a legally gray maneuver, Miss Vance, Thaddeus cautioned on a secure line. Legally speaking, however, it is tough to dispute, particularly since there is evidence of the original fund transfer from your mother. We can argue this was the loan's initial disbursement. A court case would pit your mother's testimony against your husband's, and with family enterprises, judges often trust the written contract. Vesper concurred. She would rather risk the ambiguous territory than hand over her life's work on a silver plate. The following phase involved relying on the aid of her most loyal insider, Mr. Abernathy. One afternoon, Vesper summoned Mr. Abernathy to her office at the flagship boutique. She shut the door and began to explain. A cup of tea for Mr. Abernathy, the man who stood by her since the boutique was merely a cramped, tiny room. With a grave tone, Vesper began, "I intend to divorce my husband." Mr. Abernathy regarded her with deep concern, though not with surprise. Being so close to Vesper, he had long sensed the deep troubles in his employer's home. "This is regrettable news, ma'am. Regardless of your decision, I fully support you." "Thank you," Vesper replied, sincerely. "Which is why I require your assistance. Cassius believes he is entitled to half of this company we built from nothing. I will not allow that to happen. This is not just my battle, Mr. Abernathy. It affects the future for you and every single employee who relies on this company." Vesper then laid out her plan to restructure the company's share ownership to her mother disguised as a debt repayment. She deliberately omitted that the contract was newly fabricated. She simply framed it as a long-standing obligation she was now fulfilling. Mr. Abernathy's loyalty was unshaken. "I understand, ma'am. What are my instructions?" "I need you to prepare all internal financial documents, the balance sheets and income statements. Every document must support a debt obligation to the original investor. We have to ensure the entire paper trail appears completely natural and consistent," Vesper instructed. Over the following week, she and Mr. Abernathy worked tirelessly, poring over old ledgers, inserting notes to substantiate the capital loan story, and drafting all the required documents for a fabricated general shareholders meeting. Only Vesper, the majority shareholder, and a handful of management-level staff holding minority shares from the incentive program would be present. All of them were fiercely loyal to Vesper and would rubber stamp anything she suggested. On the designated day, the share transfer was formally executed at the notary public's office. Her mother, a retired woman with a gentle demeanor, but with eyes as sharp as her daughter's, signed the paperwork without hesitation or questions. She simply squeezed Vesper's hand, saying, "Reclaim what is yours, my dear." With the notary's official seal and signature on the deed, 75% of Vesper 5 Mode's ownership was formally transferred into her mother's name. Vesper would remain as CEO, retaining complete operational control over the company's daily affairs, but legally she was no longer the majority shareholder. The company's fundamental value was now shielded from Cassius's legal grasp. Later that afternoon, with the deed done, Vesper stood alone inside the silent main boutique. She ran her hand across the beautiful dresses, feeling the rich texture of the high-quality fabrics. She had saved her empire, but the feeling of triumph was tainted with bitterness. She felt like a general, forced to scorch her own lands to prevent them from falling to the enemy. She had safeguarded her business by relinquishing official ownership, a painful but necessary sacrifice. She caught her reflection in a large corner mirror. Her face was etched with fatigue, yet her eyes blazed with unwavering resolve. The war was far from over, but her main fortress was now secure and impenetrable. As the weeks passed, Cassius's smug composure began to slowly disintegrate. Cleo, who had initially been patient, was growing more and more restless. The luxurious life Cassius promised seemed to be drifting further and further out of reach, and she started to unleash her frustrations on him. It's been nearly 2 months. What is the holdup on to end? Cleo's voice pierced through the phone, sharp and demanding. I'm tired of being stuck in this cramped apartment. I've spotted a beautiful home on the Gold Coast and the prices are just climbing. Just be patient, babe, Cassius pleaded, trying to soothe her. These legal matters require patience. Vesper assured me she's compiling the financial records for an equitable split. She's cooperating. Cooperating. A bitter, sarcastic laugh echoed from the other end of the phone. Is she really organizing, or is she hiding assets? You're too soft on her. You must take control. Check her accounts, her investments. Perhaps. She's already siphoned off all the money. We'll be left starting from scratch, completely empty-handed. Cleo's words wounded Cassius's pride. Being called soft was the greatest insult to him. Spurred on by the doubt she had sown, he resolved to conduct his own investigation. Not wanting to appear anxious before Vesper, he opted to proceed with secrecy. That evening, as Vesper showered, Cassius slipped into the study, booted up the laptop, and attempted to access the online portal for a joint investment fund he hadn't reviewed in quite some time. He typed in the credentials he remembered. Access denied. He attempted it once more, but it failed again. A message flashed on the screen. Incorrect. Username or password. He then tried the recovery option, expecting the reset link to be routed to his own email. Instead, the system notified him the link was sent to the primary registered email. To his knowledge, that address belonged to Vesper. A deep sense of unease started to creep in. The following day, he contacted customer service for the investment company. After a tedious identity confirmation process, he was finally connected with a representative. I'm unable to access my account. The account number ends with 34, Cassius stated. Of course, sir. Allow me to look into that, the agent replied. A brief silence passed before the agent spoke again. Our records indicate the password for this account was updated 2 weeks prior by the primary account holder, a Ms. Vesper Vance. Cassius's heart began to race. Updated. What was the reason for the change? That information isn't available to us, sir. As the secondary holder, you lack the authority to alter the password or initiate a recovery. You'll need to speak with the primary. Cassius slammed the phone down. That evening, he gathered his nerve to finally confront Vesper. He adopted a relaxed tone, feigning a casual inquiry. Vesper, I was trying to log into our investment account a bit ago, but I wasn't able to. It appears the password was changed. Vesper, who was engrossed in a book on the couch, glanced up at him. Her face was placid, showing no hint of being caught off guard. She had anticipated this moment. Oh, yes, that, she responded, her tone flat. My financial advisor handled it. Amidst the divorce proceedings, it was decided she would have temporary control to prevent any buy or sell orders from being placed by either one of us, pending the official ruling from the court. She explained it's a standard practice to safeguard the assets and make sure everything remains fair and transparent. Her explanation was masterful. Vesper was using his own words, fair, transparent, protect. She was turning back on Cassius the same platitudes he had once used to placate her. The justification sounded entirely professional and logical, as if it was designed to protect him as well. Cassius's suspicions faded slightly but were not gone entirely. The financial, an advisor. When did you start using one? Since the day you asked for a divorce. Vesper answered curtly, her gaze dropping to her book. I know nothing of divorce law or our financial state. I required guidance to avoid any missteps that could harm either one of us. That explanation quieted Cass. That a helpless and uninformed woman would seek expert help seemed logical, but a seed of doubt was planted. He started noticing small things. Vesper would abruptly end calls whenever he walked in. She no longer left her laptop unsecured. She began going out more often using the excuse of meeting with suppliers or managing the branches. Yet upon her return, her face was weary but resolute. This was no longer passive grief, but focused action. One night, Cass awoke to find the bed beside him empty. He searched the entire house and discovered Vesper on the balcony just gazing into the blackness of the night. She wasn't crying. She was merely sitting silently, her spine erect. A peculiar aura of strength surrounded her, and a aura that unnerved Cass slightly. "You're still awake?" he asked softly. Vesper turned. Her eyes were luminous in the garden light. "I just needed some fresh air. I have so much to think about." Cass returned to bed alone that night. His unease only continued to mount. Cleo's grievances rang in his ears, blending with the image of an ever more mysterious and illegible Vesper. For the first time, he sensed his plan, which he had deemed flawless, could have a major flaw. That flaw's name was Vesper. He attempted to dismiss the feeling, as paranoia, telling himself that everything was still proceeding as he planned. But deep down, he knew the calm before the storm had ended, and dark clouds were now gathering on the horizon. Time itself seemed to accelerate, and faster. Each moment brought Vesper closer to the finish line she had drawn. Cass was now speaking, more frequently with his lawyer preparing the last documents. Vesper knew she only had a few days left, perhaps a week at most, before the divorce was officially filed, and all their joint assets would be frozen by law. She had to finish the final step. Her last target of interest was their joint bank account, the household operating fund, which up to now was a symbol of their financial union in name alone. Compared to the hundreds of thousands of dollars she had secured in real estate investments, the sum in this account was relatively small. Yet for Vesper, securing this money had profound symbolic meaning. It was about severing the final tie that bound her to Cass, liquidating the last financial remnant of her previous life. That evening, Vesper waited until after midnight. The soft snoring from Cass in the bedroom was the signal she could proceed safely. She slipped into the study. Powering on the laptop, a familiar tension gripped her. This would likely be the very last time she would perform this secret operation. She navigated to the bank's portal and stared at the screen. The balance of the joint account showed around $35,000. Most was from her and Cass's recent salaries, plus the rest of other miscellaneous funds. She could take it all. The temptation was there. A small voice wanted her to leave him with nothing, draining the account to zero and returning his cruelty in kind. But Vesper dismissed that vengeful thought. Her aim was not petty vengeance, but methodical justice. Her triumph needed to be absolute, perfect, and legally unassailable. She accessed the transaction records, calculating with precision. Cassius's most recent salary deposit was roughly $4,000. The other remaining funds, which she couldn't prove were hers, amounted to approximately $1,000. A total of $5,000. She resolved to leave that sum in the account, only withdrawing the exact portion she could document as her own salary and business earnings. She navigated to the transfer screen and wired $30,000 into her newly established private account. The transfer was confirmed almost instantly. Once done, she glanced at the $5,000 balance, left enough for Cassius to live on for a month or two. This was no gesture of kindness. It was a calculated move. By leaving money behind, she made it nearly impossible for Cassius to claim she had committed theft or left him with nothing. It proved her actions were not driven by greed but by meticulous planning. She shut the laptop. A profound sense of relief washed over her, tinged with a surprising sorrow. That chapter was now definitively over. No financial ties remained. The concept of ours was gone, replaced by mine and his. Her quiet battle was won. All that was left was the declaration of her triumph. The following day, Vesper started to prepare for the final showdown. She avoided packing large suitcases. That would have appeared desperate, raising Cassius's suspicions if he were to see it. Instead, she prepared just one medium-sized case. Within it, she placed her best clothes, a few treasured keepsakes, her laptop, and most critically, a deep, blue file folder. This folder was her entire arsenal. It contained copies of statements from her new bank account displaying its formidable balance, the notarized deed for the lake house, and all the paperwork for the reorganized Vesper mode, now listing her mother as the majority shareholder, along with a concise summary from her attorney confirming the legality of her every move. Meticulously arranged, each document in that folder was a loaded bullet waiting to be fired. Over the next 2 days, she maintained her normal routine, but with a heightened sense of awareness. She was waiting. Each time Cassius came home from his job, her heart hammered, questioning if now was the time. And then on Friday afternoon, the moment finally came. Cassius walked in with an uncharacteristically light step. A smug smile danced on his lips. He was carrying a costly-looking brown leather briefcase in his hand. "We are going out for dinner tonight," Cassius announced with a falsely cheerful voice. "I've got something to show you. We can call it a celebration, marking the start of our new separate lives." Vesper's gaze fell on the briefcase in Cassius's hand before she gave a slow nod. "There's no need to go out. We'll talk here," she answered, her calm voice concealing a tempest. The final chapter of her life with Cassius was about to begin. The stage was set, and Vesper, both director and star, was prepared for the final act. They sat opposite each other at the very same mahogany table where the divorce had first been demanded, but now the power dynamic had completely shifted. Cassius projected an air of triumph, whereas Vesper exuded a chilling composure. Cassius set the leather briefcase on the table with a dramatic flourish. "Are you ready?" "Vesper, hey." He started, his tone patronizing, as if lecturing a small child. "My attorney is exceptionally skilled. Every document is flawless. The settlement, the list of joint assets to be divided evenly, all of it. We simply sign with the notary tomorrow, file it with the court. It will be fast, neat, and drama-free." He slid the briefcase at Vesper. "Review it so you're content. I've outlined it all. The house, the villa, our savings, your business's value. A fair split." Vesper never touched the briefcase. She allowed it to rest between them like a monument to Cassius's avarice. Instead, she reached for her own blue folder that was on the chair beside her. With movements just as calm, she set it down. "I've also prepared documents for your review." Vesper stated, her voice steady and clear. Cassius uttered a small, contemptuous chuckle. "What papers? A note from your life coach? Unnecessary, Vesper. This isn't emotional, it's a legal matter." Vesper ignored the taunt. She opened the blue folder, pulling out the first sheet of paper. "Account statement from today. Here is our joint account," Vesper said, pushing it to Cassius. "The balance is $5,000, so $2,500 each. That's fair, right?" Cassius' expression fell. His grin vanished completely. "What are you on about? Our savings are hundreds of thousands." Vesper produced the second sheet, a statement from her new bank account showing a long line of zeros. "Those are my savings, not our savings. My salary, corporate bonuses, and all my investment profits were moved here." Cassius stared in absolute disbelief. You are not permitted to do that." "Oh, but I am," Vesper answered now, presenting the third document, the sales contract for the villa. "Regarding the villa, you are too late. It was never a personal asset, it was a corporate asset. And as the administrator of Vesper 5 mode at the time, I chose to sell it last month to improve business efficiency. This is the legally binding sales agreement." Cassius ripped the paper from her hand. He saw her company's name, Vesper 5 mode, listed as the seller, and an unfamiliar name, Skyline Holdings, as the purchaser. His hand started to tremble. This can't be real. I never consented to this." "Your consent was irrelevant. It was a corporate deal," Vesper clarified, with deadly composure, "and the proceeds from that sale were deposited into the business account. Funds which naturally cannot be split as shared personal property. Cassius was struggling to breathe. His face was a mask of rage and dawning fear that began to creep over him. The business I am entitled to half of your company at least. We built it together. Is that so? Vesper raised an eyebrow. She then produced the final document, the most devastating one, a copy of the Articles of Ownership Change for Vesper 5 mode. According to this notarized deed, I am only a minority shareholder in my own company. 75% of all shares are my mother's, a condition of repaying the startup capital I borrowed from her. The business. It was a debt that came due just before you requested this divorce. Quite the coincidence, wouldn't you say? Cassius stared at the document. His mother-in-law's name was clearly printed as the majority owner. His knees went weak. His entire plan, the palace with Cleo, his lavish future. Everything crumbled before his very eyes in under 5 moments. This is blatant fraud, he yelled, slamming the table. It's criminal. You've swindled me. I am going to sue. I'm going to utterly ruin you. At that moment, Vesper finally smiled. It wasn't a warm expression, but a chilling grin filled with triumph. She rose from her seat. Go ahead, sue me. My attorney would be thrilled to meet you in court. But first consult your own lawyer. Ask him if it's unlawful for a wife to administrate assets legally registered under her name, or if it is a crime to sell company holdings, or if settling one's debts is now illegal. Vesper paused, letting her words permeate the air. You claimed I was feeble. You were mistaken. My only real weakness was allowing you to misjudge me for so long and foolishly believing that the man in my bed truly had my best interests at heart. Now I have reclaimed all that rightfully belongs to me. She walked to the entryway where her luggage awaited. Construct your new kingdom with Cleo, but you will be the one to lay the first stone alone. Farewell. With that, Vesper took the handle of her bag, swung the door open, and stepped into the crisp Chicago air, never once glancing back. The click of the door shutting behind her echoed like the fall of a judge's gavel. It was the sound that declared the trial concluded and the verdict delivered. Cassius remained alone inside the vast, now hollow home, encircled by the paper remnants of his ruined ambitions. The quiet Vesper left in her wake was far more deafening than his own shouts had been. For several minutes, Cassius just sat staring at the 2 briefcases. On the table, his own brown leather case, now worthless, and Vesper's blue portfolio, which now represented the epitaph for his future. The truth struck him with the impact of a runaway locomotive. This was not a bad dream. It was his reality. His initial response was a cocktail of disbelief and terror. He snatched his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could hardly key in his lawyer's digits. Not Thaddeus. The other one, Perez. He barked the instant the call went through with no time for pleasantries. My wife has completely duped me. She's shifted all the funds. The villa is sold. She has signed over the company stock. This is a swindle. We must take her to court. Everything needs to be frozen. From the other end of the phone, the lawyer let out a weary sigh. Settle down, Mr. Sterling. Tell me what happened slowly. When did these transfers occur? I have no idea. Likely over the past few weeks. And has the divorce filing been formally submitted to the court? The attorney asked sharply. No, my plan was for tomorrow. A heavy silence then followed. Cassius could sense the dread mounting. Counselor Perez, are you still on the line? Mr. Sterling. The attorney's tone was devoid of emotion, purely professional. I must inform you of a very harsh reality. If every transaction took place prior to a divorce petition being officially filed, and those assets were lawfully in your wife's name or that of her company, then what she has done is with near certainty entirely lawful. Lawful, Cassius gasped, struggling to comprehend what he was hearing. That does not qualify as theft, sir. It is classified as asset management. By law, until a court order or an asset freeze is in place, She's at liberty to do as she pleases with her own property. You ought to have filed the petition the moment you chose to divorce. You granted her a significant window of time. From a legal standpoint, she did not defraud you. She merely outmaneuvered you. The phone slid from Cassius's grasp, hitting the floor with a flat, final sound. Outmaneuvered. That single word reverberated in his mind. Vesper, the woman he saw as weak, meek, and foolish, had so thoroughly outmaneuvered him. His very next thought was of Cleo. He had to inform her. With hands still shaking, he called his lover. "Hello, baby. So what's the news? When are we signing?" Cleo's voice was bright, brimming with hope. "Cleo, we have a problem." Cassius whispered, his voice cracking. "She took it all. Everything is gone." Silence. Not of shock, but a chilling, lethal quiet. "What do you mean gone?" Cleo demanded. Her voice plunged several octaves. "She moved it all. She sold the villa. The stock is in her mother's name. There is only a small amount left in our joint account and this house which has a mortgage." Cassius clarified. "You absolute fool!" A grating, bitter laugh erupted from the other end. "Gone? You actually let her take everything from you. Are you a complete moron? I upended my entire life for your promises, and now you tell me it's all vanished." "I had no idea she would do something like this. I just thought You thought she was stupid. It seems the real fool was you." Cleo cut in savagely. "I have no desire to struggle through life. I refuse to start over with a failure like you. Never contact me again." And the line went dead. Click. Just like that, it was over. The great love he'd used to justify ruining his marriage was revealed to be nothing more than a financial transaction. He was now utterly alone. His panic morphed into complete despair. He had to reach Vesper. He had to plead with her. He returned to his phone, firing off texts in a rapid volley. The initial message was filled with rage. "Vesper Vance, you will live to regret this. I won't let this stand." There was no reply. His second text held threats. "I will expose how manipulative you are. I will destroy your reputation and your business." Still only silence. The third message softened into a negotiation. "All right, okay. I admit I was wrong. I apologize. Let's just talk about this. Please don't do this. I will give you anything you ask for." Still no response. Finally, his facade of arrogance completely crumbled and became a pathetic plea. "Vesper, please don't abandon me like this. I am left with nothing. I am sorry for it all. Please just answer my text." He waited for 1 hour, his eyes glued to the phone screen, hoping for any sign of life. Then he tried sending another message, but something was off. The text message would not go through, it failed to deliver, showing just a single checkmark that never turned blue. He attempted to call. The call failed to connect. Vesper had blocked him. That dawning realization was the final crushing blow. What truly destroyed him wasn't shouting or insults. It was Vesper's complete silence. That silence was his final judgment. He was no longer deemed worthy of even a single response. Cassius threw himself down on the couch in the darkened living room. The grand house, once his symbol of success, now felt like a cold, empty tomb. He was now surrounded by costly furniture and hollow memories. The remnants of his own avarice lay all around him, and he was the sole inhabitant of this ruin, consumed by a regret that came too late. 1 year went by. Time, which once felt like a slow foe, in his days filled with anxiety, had now become a restorative ally. 1 year was enough time to bring a world down, and also enough to construct an entirely new one. In a penthouse boasting panoramic views of the sparkling Chicago night, Vesper started her day. The crisp city air that met her on the balcony carried the aromas of urban energy and fresh possibilities. Beginnings. The grand house, once a vessel for painful memories, was no longer her home. She had relocated not just in body, but also in mind and spirit. Her appearance had transformed as well. Her hair was now shorter, styled in a chic, natural cut that perfectly framed her face, a face that now exuded confidence at all times. Her wardrobe was no longer simply cute. Boutique ensembles. She now donned sharply colored business suits and elegant evening gowns by global designers. She was no longer merely the proprietor of a local shop. She had become a businesswoman whose name was starting to resonate throughout the European fashion scene. That very morning, she concluded a video conference with her Chicago team, Vesper 5 Mode, now officially her own again after buying back the shares from her mother with her own funds, was in the midst of a massive expansion. The team was preparing to launch their first international flagship boutique in the city of Paris. All preparations are on schedule, Director Mr. Abernathy reported, appearing on her laptop screen with a bright expression. Our logistics partners are all set, and the visual team has finalized the interior design. We're right on schedule. Excellent, Mr. Abernathy, Vesper replied with a genuine smile. My thanks for your and the team's diligent work. Could not have accomplished this without all of you. After ending the call, Vesper walked to the coffee machine for an intense espresso. As she sipped her coffee, her gaze drifted to the horizon. The divorce trial had concluded 6 months prior. Through his desperate attorney, Cassius attempted a counterattack, suing Vesper for fraud and embezzlement, but Thaddeus's legal team effortlessly dismantled every allegation. It was proven all of Vesper's transactions were executed lawfully before the petition was ever filed and involved assets solely under her legal purview. In the end, Cassius received nothing more than what Vesper had permitted him to keep. The divorce was finalized with asset division based on the final circumstances, meaning Cassius only got half the funds left in their joint account and the sole obligation to keep paying the house mortgage by himself. Vesper occasionally thought of him, but the pain was gone. The memory was now like watching an old film starring someone else. She had come to understand that Cassius's betrayal was no reflection on her shortcomings, but on the weakness of his own character. The anguish had been fertilizer for her resilience, compelling her to grow into a version of herself she never imagined possible. She felt peaceful, complete, and above all else, she was free. Across town, in a cramped studio apartment within an old building on the city's edge, Cassius lived his new reality. The large house was sold because he could not afford the payments. After settling the remaining mortgage and other debts, there was very little money left over. He now worked for a startup, his salary a fraction of his former standard of living. That evening, he sat alone on his worn-out sofa. The only light in the room came from his mobile phone screen. Was scrolling through social media, an old habit, the very one that initiated his downfall and had now become his daily torment. His finger paused on a post from the renowned business magazine Black Enterprise. The image was a photograph from the Businesswoman of the Year Awards Gala. At the center of the stage, adorned in a stunning burgundy gown, there stood a woman holding a crystal trophy, a brilliant smile on her face. That woman was Vesper. Cassius stared at the photograph for a long while. The woman in the photograph looked so alien, not because of her hairstyle or attire, but due to the aura of strength and joy radiating from her. This was a Vesper he had never known, or more precisely, a Vesper he'd never allowed himself to see. And in that moment, the final gut-wrenching truth struck him. He saw what he'd squandered wasn't merely wealth or possessions. He had thrown away a woman with the brilliance to forge an empire and the resilience to weather any storm and the devotion to remain by his side. Every quality he had foolishly dismissed as a flaw, her patience, her integrity. Vesper's compassion were in fact the very foundations of her power. He had discarded a true diamond, mesmerized by the glint of worthless glass, named Cleo. Ah, Cleo. The last he'd seen of her was also online, cozied up affectionately with another wealthy older gentleman. The cycle repeated itself, and he was simply another casualty of his own immense folly. Regret burned like acid in his gut. It wasn't just regret for his lost fortune, but a profound regret for his own blindness. his arrogance, and his ultimate failure as a man. He shut off the phone, letting the room's oppressive darkness consume him entirely. His only remaining possession was eternal regret. Back in her penthouse, Vesper set down her coffee. She gazed at her reflection in the vast window. Behind her, the elegant interior of the luxurious apartment was mirrored. Before her, a brilliant cityscape unfolded, shimmering with promise and endless opportunity. She no longer looked back. The past was a lesson, not her prison. With a faint smile of confidence, she turned away from the window, prepared to welcome the new day and poised to conquer a new world. Dawn had broken, and this dawn belonged entirely to her. Did you enjoy that story? I'd love to know what city you're tuning in from. Let's connect in the comments. If you like the story, please consider supporting me with a super thanks. It helps me continue to bring you more stories just like this. Thank you for your amazing support. I truly look forward to reading your thoughts on the story. On your screen now, you'll find 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch. There's so much more content on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and reverence.